For those of you that are aware of the way the church year goes and the way the story is laid out, this is a familiar text, which we call Transfiguration Sunday. And actually, this is the Sunday in the lectionary year that we celebrate it particularly. But we aren't really used to it because this is the Sunday right before Lent. We're in the story and the way the year goes round and round. So usually when it comes time to preach this story or hear this story, it's all in the context of preparation. It's all in the context of how are you going to enter a holy Lent. So this year, and I, was as surprised as you, I will admit, when I opened up the lectionary readings on Monday and saw, oh, it's Transfiguration Sunday. And as I was thinking about them and praying with them this week, I thought to myself, one of the gifts of having them in the midst of ordinary time, which is what we're in right now, is kind of an ability to look at the readings as they stand alone, as they stand all on their own, as completely separate from the Lent. And so what does that mean? Who cares, besides people like me? What it might mean is we hear particular intention from Jesus about prayer. And we hear that particular intention that when Jesus prays and as he calls his disciples to pray, that they are changed. And I would like to believe that as we pray, we are changed. How is it that we live a life with God and not be changed? Maybe we won't spend much time on that. Maybe we can just spend time with being in relationship with God does change us. But how? And remember, part of ordinary time is as we go from Advent 1 all the way right through the resurrection and then and that whole piece about Easter, the 50 days of Easter, is the story of Jesus. Ordinary time isn't necessarily about being ordinary. It's about how do we come and know and live with God in our everyday life. So the first thing we hear is that Jesus goes up and goes away to pray. He goes away, he moves. He's intentional about that time, and that time is important. I was reading an article yesterday, and it was a story about this woman who had just won this big prize for being a chef, the James Beard Prize. She doesn't live in New York City or Los Angeles or some mega place. She lives in Monson, Maine. And if you're a person like Kirsten and I are that likes to wander around Maine, you will know that Monson, Maine is not very far from Bangor, which is just up 95 a piece. And you go up and then you just get off 95 and you drive. Mountain is not a big place. And she was a woman that was brought up in the Philippines. She was a Philippine woman. And she came to the United States when she was 21. And she met her husband, and somehow or other, they ended up in Monson, Maine on Christmas. And they looked around, and the snow was everywhere. And he thought to himself, my God, she's going to leave me right after. They weren't engaged yet. She's never going to want to talk to me again. And she thought the place was magic. All she saw was light. She describes when they interviewed her that she talks about the light being under the snow. I love that, right? Under the snow, she just thought it was beautiful. He asked her to marry him that weekend. Let's capture this moment. And they eventually moved to Monson, Maine, a little bit north of Bangor. And they brought up their children. She came to this country at 21. Jesus goes up the mountain to pray, but it is important. It is important that he come back down. He goes up to the mountain to pray, and he takes the three with him, but they want to stay because it works, right? And we've all had those times in our life, haven't we? When we maybe thought we had formed a particular trade, or we had formed a particular way of being, or we had a particular group of friends. And all of a sudden, things started falling away. And maybe we thought, my God, what am I doing wrong? Maybe something is changing and you know, but it feels like failure because what do you do? Richard Rohr talks a lot in his book about In Falling Upward about how it is that the first part of our life is about coming to know God and coming to know ourselves. And that it's actually, as we get older, that we're called to leave home, he says. Our homes aren't we're not necessarily called to just stay in the tent. Although Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, were trying to lead communities that were divided, full of strife, full of division. Couldn't agree on anything. It sounds so different, doesn't it? And so they were trying to find ways to lead these communities to find God in the midst of central things like today, in our world today. Most of us can agree that we need to find ways to feed and clothe people. Most of us believe that we can find ways to educate people, that it's by educating and empowering people that we can move forward to be a healthy people. We get to disagree on how to do that. But we must do it together. So Jesus and Moses and Elijah were leading a divided people just like we are today. And they kept saying, we need to come back to God. What's your passion? And so on those days, and as I talk to many of you that are all in different places and different parts of your life journey, it seems like so many of those conversations for myself and for you come back to, okay, what can I do? What is my part of the story? I might not be able to change, homelessness in the United States, but what is my action? Or what is my passion? How is it that we can find that? And it must begin with us and our relationship with God. So Jesus says to them, no, we can't be building tents up here. We've got to go down. We've got to go back into our lives. If any of you have been on vacation this summer, maybe there was a part of you that thought, really? It's over already? Are you sure? But perhaps you do find yourself, I hope for your sake, it's true for me, find yourself when you get back, it's like, oh yeah, I really am lighter spirit. Oh yeah, I really did get to be lighter spirit. And yet I really do need to come back into the world. So this woman is now moved, Mary Lou is her name, and she moved to Monson, Maine with her beloved. And what did she do? She raised a family because that's what we do. And she had neighbors and she had friends and she made sure the kids got to school and she did her life. And then at 47 years old, she decided to go to the culinary program in Eastern Maine. She did not go to a famous school in London that a friend of mine went to, and I don't remember the name of it. She did not go to a fabulous, she went to Bangor because Monson is near Bangor. And so she went to Eastern Maine Culinary Institute and she went to school at 47 years old and she got her degree. And then she went home and said, okay, I'm going to open up a restaurant. And everybody said to her, nobody lives in Monson, Maine, and nobody's going to travel to Monson, Maine. And Monson, Maine isn't exactly a destination. And even if people are going to Bangor, they're still not going to come to Monson. She said, but I live in Monson and I'm a cook. Her husband and children keep telling her she's a chef. She keeps telling them she's a cook. So what do we do with that first part of our life? Where could God be leading us when we think it's absurd, when we don't know where we're going, when we don't know, but God says you've got to go back into the mountain, you've got to go back into the world. So she opened up this restaurant. If you're ever in Monson, it's called The Quarry, named after her husband's grandparents, who also lived in Monson, Maine. And as you know, somehow her work started to be known throughout. And the big thing that she was known for, besides wonderful food, was hospitality. Everybody wanted to spend just a little bit of time in that restaurant. Maybe you've read a book, if you've ever read like Louise Penny's books, you want to live in 3 times. No, you even just for a little while. You know, everybody wanted to be in her restaurant. Well, go figure, somebody got there and she won this award. So here she is in this magazine getting interviewed, and they asked her, well, what do you think about this award? And she's like, I've never even heard of it. But I think it's very nice and I'm very grateful. But she said, let me tell you a story about the James Beards that are really important to me. Not that I'm not grateful. She said, first of all, ask any Filipino person, and they will tell you that hospitality is who we are. We welcome you and we are glad you are here. So I am glad that that is how I'm experienced, but it's not unusual from where I came from. But yes, I hope I do. And she said, recently, after all this hubbub, she said, I don't know where all the hubbub is, and I find out that people have found out about me, and I don't even know them. This couple came because she comes out every night and talks to people in the restaurant. They're like, why do you do that? She said, I want to meet them. They came to supper. And she went and she talked to this one couple, and they just seemed so down to earth. And she said to them, you know, asked them about them, and they said, we have been saving up to come here. We have been saving up to come here because we heard about you. And we don't live very far away and we don't go out much. And, you know, but this is such a cool story. And she looked at them and she thanked them for coming and said, dinner is on you, on me. Excuse me, that would have been. Dinner is on me. And she said to the person that was interviewing her, that's the award. They came to dinner, and the least I could do was be grateful. So as we imagine this Transfiguration Sunday, and we're usually thinking about Lent, certainly as the priest, I'm usually 3 or 4 Sundays ahead, so God knows what I say about it. I just want us to hold up the readings this morning, that when Jesus goes up the mountain to pray, he's changed. And the cloud comes over the disciples and they're terrified, but they manage to stay awake, only in Luke. Matthew's not sure they were awake, but in Luke it says they managed to stay awake. And then we hear the words, which are different. Because when Jesus is baptized, we hear God saying, you are my beloved. And on this Sunday, when Jesus is trying to call us off our mountain, or trying to help us see where in our lives are we changed. Maybe it's big things like winning an award, or maybe it's little things. By realizing you have what you need and it is good. We hear this morning the difference between you and this. Jesus is telling us, this is my beloved. It's okay, everybody. This is God. Listen up. So as we lead this morning and go out into this glorious day, I ask us to wonder, how would we call something a miracle? Would it be the lights under the snow in a town that nobody wants to go to or hasn't heard about? Would it be having a friend call and least expect or didn't think you had any? Maybe it's just that perspective where you start to know that by being on the path with God, through the hard times and the good times and the boring times and all our lives with God, that we repeatedly are changed. And that sometimes we go through those periods where things fall away and we're called out. Sometimes that happens inside, sometimes that happens outside. At 47 years old, she went back to school in Bangor. Now she doesn't know what all the hubbub is, but she followed her passion and she followed her love. And she says she's just a cook and doing what she was brought up to do, be nice to people. Funny thing is, that seems to be really popular, even with these fancy award people.